and also a volunteer. Shad Slater, who is a diversion caseworker with Lancaster County Human Services. And Christopher Reed, Chief Deputy of Juvenile Division in Lancaster County Attorney's Office.
Good morning. What do you do with truancy? Who's had that conversation? Lancaster County, we had this a few years ago. We kind of made a commitment to infuse restorative justice into everything we do. And so when we were dealing with middle school truancy, we started brainstorming of how we could do this differently. And so we came together with the work of the county, the work of the county attorney, the mediation center, and we had an awful lot of people who had worked within the schools to try to figure out when you had a youth, parents, and things weren't working well, and it just kept going bad. What kind of space could you create to put a priority on to see what we could do together? And so we've been doing this program for 3 years, 4 years, and we have some statistics on it. And the emphasis today, you're going to hear Chris talk a little bit about high school, but this is middle school truancy is what we've been working on. And so we're going to walk you through in Lancaster County when we get a case, what happens in the county attorney's office, what happens with the county and what they want to have, and then we have our facilitators, mediators, are going to walk through what's going to happen when we get the case and the hopes of what we can do with these youth and their parents to help them make a decision differently. With the mediation background, that's a lot of what we're trying to do, is we're trying to listen, trying to get them to explore on possible options and what they're willing to commit to. What's different, tomorrow we're doing a presentation on diversion, and a lot of times diversion is an incident. You know, truancy isn't an incident. Truancy will happen. And as you know, there's more underneath the water of what's going on, and then how do we support them to help make those decisions differently? So we're going to first start out with Chris Reed and our county attorney, and what he does with the case with his death.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Chris Reed, Lancaster County Attorney's Office. I'm curious, before we really get started, just kind of different groups that we have here, different professionals, maybe just kind of shout out advocates or teachers, CASA. Who else we have?
Therapists.
Perfect, therapists, great. Awesome.
Truancy officer.
Mediation, I heard someone else.
Truancy officer.
Truancy officer, perfect.
Alternative schools.
Alternative schools, great, glad you're here. Any prosecutors, just curious? I thought I saw one, perfect. Well, I would love, this to be as interactive as you all are comfortable with, so feel free if you have questions along when I'm talking about kind of how we are processing cases here in Lancaster County. Shout it out, raise your hand, whatever. We want this to be as informal as we can, a little bit smaller setting. A little bit about myself. I've been with Lancaster County Attorney's Office about 10 years now. Started off in juvenile court as a young attorney, did that for several years. Our office, juvenile court, we do truancies, so a lot of what we're going to talk about here today. Juvenile law violators, we will prosecute those cases, and then we have the child abuse and neglect side on the 3A case with the statute that we handle as well. I did that, then I transitioned over to the criminal side of our office, spent several years prosecuting domestic violence, and then several years prosecuting sexual assaults, including child sexual assaults, child sexual trafficking, and recently, in the last 6 months, took over a role running our juvenile division, which means our chief deputy has been responsible for overseeing our diversion programs, including middle school and high school diversion, which I will tell you are the most frustrating cases that I deal with. It's the way that our system is, and the statutes, different things that we can do to try and engage can be really frustrating. So when we have options like this, with middle school diversion to take stuff out of our courts and give us some more tools and quicker responses, we're seeing a lot of success with these programs. So we're going to explain to you kind of how this works, what we're seeing, and feel free, as I said, if you have any questions, kind of let us know. This light on.
shout as much. All right. So this is our juvenile diversion middle and high school track. Middle school is mainly what we're focused on, but I'll explain how we do high school as well. It's a little bit different. So our goal simply is to reduce the number of youth that are coming through the juvenile court system. In Lancaster County, I think right now we are able to divert anywhere from 78 and about 80-82% of our youth that are coming to our office on a referral, either for a law violation or for a truancy referral from the court system. Our goal is to maintain about 80-85% diversion rates. And we're not going to always just not do a court intervention if we don't think it's appropriate for a case. We certainly will file, but we're trying to screen cases that we think we can divert and be successful with that. And so for truancies, what we found is the sooner we can get them into the courts or to the diversion program, the better in terms of success rates. Again, we're trying to change a pattern of behavior that's existed for quite some time with these youth and intervene at an earlier stage to try and get them to go to school and engage in school again. So middle school diversion, we're looking at 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. I would say probably 96% of our cases come from Lincoln Public Schools. We have a couple other school districts in the county, Malcolm, Raymond, Waverly, Norris. We get a few cases from them, but the bulk of our referrals are coming from Lincoln Public Schools. LPS has a stage letter process that they send out. Typically it's I think 5 days, 10 days, 15 days, 20 days that they will send out letters to the family letting them know. And then around the 10-day mark of unexcused absences is when LPS is going to be trying to hold a collaborative plan process. Are you all familiar with collaborative plans? Perfect. See a lot of head shaking, yes. So that's when they hold the collaborative plan. The first hurdle that we see is getting parents to respond to the schools and engage in that process, which can be a little bit difficult. But once we get through that process where we have enough information evidence where we could file the case in juvenile court is when we get the referral packet from the school so we can begin the process. So once we get that referral packet, how we have it set up now in our office is all those referrals go to an email address. A couple of our paralegals have access to that. As soon as they see a referral come in, they open the file up in our system and it gets automatically sent over with the middle schooler to the truancy diversion office. Chad, who's over here, he does a lot of those. And so that triggers them to start their screening process. So Chad will talk a little bit more about that, but he'll screen them. Sometimes it's some other people in his office that will screen those cases, and then they will make a recommendation to my office if they think they're appropriate or not for a middle school diversion. And I would say the vast majority of those cases, I don't have a stat on them, are screened, recommended for a middle school diversion. And if that's the recommendation, unless there's something I specifically know about the family from some other cases or meetings at some of the schools where I think we do need court intervention, we're going to approve those cases for diversion. My philosophy is if diversion's saying, yeah, we want to work with them, let's give that a shot. We have nothing to lose. It's a much quicker intervention than if we file in the court and go through the traditional court route. So you can kind of see on here our flow chart. So school submits the request to file. Typically, it says on here determines sufficient evidence. Anymore, though, we're trying to get these sent over more quickly, so they're going over to the diversion office. They do their school refusal assessment. They do their recommendations if they think that the case is appropriate for diversion. If it is appropriate for diversion, they let us know that. And that goes down the flow chart here. I will decide then, yes, for diversion. That's the point where I'm going to be looking at it, making sure that we do have enough evidence. As a prosecutor, I do have an ethical obligation to not file any case that I don't think we have evidence to support the filing. And that same goes with our diversion programs too. Because if we decide yes to diversion, that means that we're also saying that if they don't participate in the diversion, we're going to do a court filing. So we have to make sure we have enough evidence to support that filing. So those cases go through diversion. Once they get screened for diversion, the diversion officer, usually a Chad, will go out, connect with the family at the school. They'll do what we call a truancy circle with the mediation center. So those folks will tell you more about that here in just a little bit. And then they put the plan in place to start changing the attendance issue and whatever services are appropriate for that particular case. If attendance does not improve, then ultimately we'll get a referral back from diversion to go ahead and file that in juvenile court. Or if it is a case where either the family says, no, we don't want to do diversion, we want to fight this in court, we do get that occasionally. Or if it's a case where maybe I have some more information that diversion wouldn't be appropriate, or when they do the screening, it's clear that we need more interventions and what diversion can do, then we'll look at filing those in juvenile court. Any questions on that so far? Yeah.
So what's the time frame, usually or typically where it's decided whether it's successful and successful in order to
With diversion, like once they get on diversion?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question is the time frame for when a determination is made of whether they're successful or unsuccessful on diversion. Yeah. So it's all going to depend on the case. We typically, I want to say a semester.
60 days, usually 60 school days is what we would look at.
Okay. 60 school days is kind of what we're looking at for the success period. Some cases will take that full 60 days and say, yeah, they're not, this isn't working, let's send it back to court. We have a few, I think, where you've reached out, where it's clear in the first 20, 30 days that they're just not going to school at all despite this, and so we'll go ahead and refer them back to court. Any other questions? Yeah.
When you have court, what is your age that you look at? Because I know I know the law says one thing, but it's tough to get it going when it's 17, 18, 16 is kind of that cutoff. For you guys at Lancaster County, where do you kind of draw the line of what you're looking at? Is it more middle school, 9th grade, that side?
Yeah, great question. So the question is, we have age cutoffs that we're looking at. So they have to be at least 11. Our middle schoolers, they're all going to be within the ages that we can file. High schoolers, we'll talk about this in a minute. If they are 18, there's no juvenile court jurisdiction. They're no longer subject to mandatory attendance laws. If they're 17, typically I want to make sure that we have at least a full semester worth of schooling that we can engage them in before they turn 18. So if we get them, they're 17, they're going to turn 18 in 2 months, we're going to no charge that because we just don't have the resources and the time to really work with those kids. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Yeah.
When you have a youth that's involved in the truancy diversion, is there anything that you do to kind of wrap around the family if there's younger siblings that to kind of avoid them falling into the same?
That is a great question. I'm going to let Shad answer that when he gets up here.
Oh.
I think he's probably better suited with some of the specifics that we put in place. So hold that on. All right. So our middle school program requirements. The first thing we do is a school refusal assessment. That's part of the screening process that diversion does. It kind of gives us a perspective on what's going on with why kids aren't going to school. Have you all seen those before? Some of you, I see some head shaking no. It's basically a tool that identifies different areas of why a kid doesn't go to school. One of them, I think, is something, and these negative stimuli provokes a reaction. It's basically saying that the stimuli at school they don't like, and so they're not going to go to school for that reason. There's some other things, attention seeking, there's different areas in that helps us understand more psychological mental health perspective is why kids aren't going to school. So then we do the truancy mediation circle, case plans developed. We'll tell you more about that here in a minute. And then we have kind of our requirements and our steps in the program. So step 1, 70% attendance for 10 days. And then it steps up all the way to 90% attendance for 15 school days to be successful. And again, 60 days to complete steps 1 through 3. And then at that point, if they've completed all that, Shad's just going to send up information to my office that they've successfully completed the program, and it recommends that they have their case officially no charged, record will be sealed, all of that information. But then if there are cases where they're not meeting those goals, then we look at if we're going to file in court. So that's for our middle school diversion. We'll give you a little bit more in-depth information here in just a minute on kind of what the program requirements look like. and what the truancy circle looks like. But we want to talk a little bit about the high schoolers, just because I know some of you are going to deal with that as well. So we do have a high school truancy diversion program that's quite a bit different in how it operates. Still the same process from LPS for us to get a request to file. Same information that we receive. We're looking at that 20+ days of unexcused absences is what we're looking at statute for us to be able to file, having that collaborative plan already done. And then with those cases come to us, and then I am the one that ends up screening those cases, and I work with our social workers at our high schools that run our truancy diversion programs to determine which kids we think would be a good fit. And so if we do truancy diversion for the high school, we end up bringing those kids into the courthouse. We actually file those cases in court. We bring them all in for what we call a truancy diversion intake session. Typically have anywhere between 20 to 30 kids. We do them monthly, so we bring in 20 to 30 families into one of our courtrooms. I am there. We have a defense attorney who is appointed by the court in all of our truancy diversion cases. He then will co-present with me on truancy diversion to these families. We'll explain the benefits of doing diversion versus going through the traditional court route, and then we'll see if those kids will sign up. So currently we have 5 high schools that we're doing these diversion programs with. You can see them there. And then we have a couple other high schools that we're not doing them with. A lot of it's a resource issue. Each high school we have a social worker who has funding specifically to handle our truancy diversion kids. Most of our programs, like at Lincoln High and Northeast, there's some of our schools that probably have the most truancy kids. We're looking at about 20 kids in the program at any time. And then some of those schools have a little bit less kids. They just don't have as many truancy cases. We have some eligibility requirements there that you can see on the screen there. And then how the program goes is the student comes in twice a month, once every other week essentially, to meet with the team, and they talk about their attendance, their grades, and therapy. So our 3 requirements for high school diversion is go to school, get good grades, and attend therapy. We have grant funding to pay for therapy if the family doesn't have it. So that's something that we're able to do. And typically these truancy diversion meetings, it's at the school. Once a month I go to those meetings, so we're kind of the, have the hammer, so to speak. The county attorney's here, you better straighten up, sort of thing that we kind of implore upon them. This is serious, they can't go back to court. We have the social worker and the principal that also are at those meetings. And then the other month when I'm not there, the social worker and the principal will meet with the kids for the other part of it. Yeah.
So the social workers are employees of the public schools, but then
Correct.
grant funding that also pays for the part that they do in truancy?
Correct. Correct. And so with that, we're typically looking at them for a semester, and then we have various steps to the programs. It's kind of similar to the middle school where we want all passing grades and we want to see an increase in attendance. Since we check in with them every 2 weeks, we have, being as a 10, 7 of the last 10 days of school, then it ramps up to 8. Finally, to graduate, it's 9 out of the last 10 days of school. Typically takes about a semester to complete that program. We also have an incentive and a sanction-based system where they can get gift cards, things like that, if they're meeting homework goals, going to school, engaging in therapy. And then we do have a sanction part of that too, where if they miss truancy diversion court, if they miss too many classes, too many tardies, other issues, and they have to maybe write a reflection paper, do extra study hall after school. And then if they hit 8 sanctions, we look at probably sending them back to court, is kind of how we do that. Although, I would say at Lincoln High specifically, there's a lot of kids with higher needs there. We're a little bit more flexible because we're really trying to keep those kids in the program and trying to get graduation with that. We have probably about 40% of the kids successfully graduate, about 20 to 25% actually go back to court, and then the remaining percent are kids that may leave the school, move out of district, get approved for homeschooling, or turn 18, and so they never were sent back to court, but they never successfully graduated either. So we are seeing some success with that program. It's been going on for several years now. All right, I'll turn it over to
everyone. My name's Shad Slater, and as kind of Chris alluded to, I'm the one that kind of works with these kids. So kind of the process, and Chris did a good job of explaining it, kind of the process on a big level, but kind of how we do things. We'll get the information from the county attorney's office that the school has sent over, and then we usually then kind of do our screening process, which involves first contacting the family, and we do kind of like a phone interview with both the parents and the student, and just kind of see what are the main issues, and kind of get a good feel, for will they be successful if we're working with them, what kind of interventions, maybe we can put in when we're working with them. So we take all that information, complete the screening on them, and send it over to the county attorney with a recommendation, kind of how Chris explained it. And then he usually says yes or no. If he sends it back over to us for diversion, then we contact the mediation center, and they set up the truancy circle. And so that's kind of us, the mediation center, and the school and the family are all involved in kind of a mediation process where we all get together. We kind of talk about what are the strengths of the student, what are their goals, what do they want to kind of accomplish, and kind of put it on the student of, what are the issues, what's keeping you from school. And sometimes we have kids that are really, really involved in that process, and those are usually the ones that we see a lot more success with. They'll say, this is the problem, and a lot of times they'll come in already addressing the problem, because after that interview that we initially have, sometimes that will, get the parent to say, hey, this is serious, this is what we need to do, and they'll kind of start working on that on their own, and we really appreciate whenever they come in like that, because they're more motivated, they're already kind of doing some of that stuff, and then the school's really good about that, telling us, hey, since you guys met with them, like they're already going, they're doing some good things. So we kind of talk through the process. We put it on the student though to kind of come up with what are the things I need to be successful. So we kind of develop a case plan based around that, and we do have limited services. I know there was a question as far as that. The one that we mainly use is Omni PMT, which is parent management training, and it's an individual that will meet with the family. They'll go over, say, there's an issue with bedtime or following rules, and they'll kind of just work with the family and the parent on, what kind of consequences can you put in, what kind of things can you use as incentives, and kind of work around that problem. So that's kind of our main thing, and if there's mental health issues or something like that we see when we're doing the initial screening, we can also set up a eval, set up therapy, things like that. We can kind of help with the family. And then so we come up with this plan, everybody together, and then the parents sign off on it, the student signs off on it, the school knows the whole plan because they're involved in this whole process. And then we kind of monitor them going forward, and as Chris kind of said, it's 60 days, school days is kind of what we look at. And obviously every kid is individual, and some will go right away, some will have issues right away, and so everything is kind of based around how they're doing. So if they're going to school and doing what they need to, they get off on the program a lot faster than kids, that aren't. And sometimes we see kids that just aren't going at all. We'll start monitoring their attendance, and they're just not going. And so, kind of at that point, it's we send it back over to Chris, because rather get court involved and kind of address the problem, because the sooner we address it, the better. So that's kind of what we look at. We'll contact the school, monitor the attendance. We have incentives that we can award the kids, and we usually look at those goals that they're hitting. So they hit that 70%, 80%, 90%. We can provide gift cards. I love meeting with the kids at the school and providing those gift cards, and the kids that are doing good, I think that's a good incentive for them to continue to do well. So kind of, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the services that you provide, or services you're able to connect the families to? If the hurdle is transportation, for example, or mental health, do you have any specific services for that?
Well, and transportation is a big issue, especially here in Lincoln, as busing is not provided to all the students. We do have bus passes, and I know that's not the answer to everything, and so we have bus passes we can provide for them. I know that the school also sometimes can help them with transportation, and they can kind of help connect them. And so that's, if transportation is the main issue, we usually talk about that in the truancy circle, and so the school social worker will usually work with the family on some of those issues. And as I said, as far as like mental health, a lot of times there's therapists that will go into the school, and so if that's a thing, usually it's been talked about with the school. If mental health is usually a problem, they're usually already addressing that, so we kind of talk around that. If it's an eval that needs to be set up, we usually work with Hope Spoke, and they can reach out to the family, set that up. The county helps provide funding for those evals. So those are kind of the main things that we work with. Obviously, diversions doesn't have access to as many like services as probation would, or court involved kids do. So we try to address whatever issues we can as far as service, the limited services that we do have. So but then, like I said, we monitor the kids for 60 days. That can go into another school year too. So if we get a 7th grader and it's say April, and they don't get through that 60 days, and they're kind of like right along the line, 70% attendance, 80% attendance, and we can work with them starting the next school year. So I'll usually just check in with the family over the summer, see how things are going. If it's an issue with kids getting to bed on time, I usually talk to the parents around that, like how's that going, and we can set up services kind of going into the next school year too, like Omni PMT if that's an issue. And so is there any other questions kind of in as far as our role in everything?
Is it only 60 days, like after the 60 days, they either have to go to court or be successfully?
And if they're right along that area, we could extend it past the 60 days, and so it kind of individualized.
What incentives do you have for parents? And I don't know if that's ever an issue that kids follow through kind of mostly, but parents tank it or sabotage it.
What incentives do we have for parents to kind of do? I think, we kind of point out to them, that this is, the easier course for them. Like if they have to go to court, they're gonna have to miss work, they're gonna have to, all those other things that they're gonna have to deal with later on. So we kind of talk that with them. We don't really have incentives that we give to the parents, but that's kind of, I think, the biggest incentive for them to kind of work with us.
I guess I'll throw you a scenario that I'm an education advocate with the Malone Center, and a unique scenario came up where you have a parent that has a 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and the school that's within their boundary is having to allow them to cross like Vine Street, like a main street. And mom works at the time that school starts, and if she's late again, she's probably gonna lose her job, or she's juggling, I either am late every day, and so you're like, well, why can't they go to the school that's, whoever drew the boundary now, God bless them, but why can't they go to the school that's probably next door, but because that fine line, they have to go to the one that, so she's not comfortable letting her, I wouldn't be either, my 8-year-old watch my 5-year-old and them together cross one of the most dangerous streets in the city, but at the same time, the reason they're late every day, or I decide this route is because I could lose my job. Then you have a whole nother issue. So like those barriers, I think are like, I guess the dynamic between, I guess you guys and LPS, then I think that comes into play, because also there's a deadline for when they can apply to go to another school if they're out of the back. I guess all these intricate things sometimes that are barriers, and it's a struggle sometimes even for me to assist with that barrier. And then I know you brought up transportation, that's like number one here. I don't know who are in these transportation meetings as far as StarTran, even myself. If you've never ridden StarTran, you are blessed to be able to say that. But I feel like that becomes an issue too, teaching the kids to navigate the bus system. Where I grew up, I could catch the bus any hour of the day, anytime. It was just a thing. But I think the transportation is a barrier, but I ran into that unique situation, and that created like a whole bunch, like she would get the letters, like you said, from LPS, and then she would get nervous that meant, that she was intentionally, doing things on purpose. So I guess, how do you navigate that dynamic when it's more than just, it's other powers that be that are in place?
And as you kind of said, and I know there are meetings talking about transportation. I know me and Chris were on one, and I don't know if he can talk later on about that, but I know that's a huge issue and everything. And a lot of times whenever we're talking with the families in the first initial interview, they'll kind of bring up some of those issues. And that's why it's good to have the school on board. And I know that the Mediation Center does a good job too of kind of addressing some of those concerns. And so then usually with everybody involved, we kind of talk around that. Like I said, I know transportation is a huge issue, and from what the scenario you're talking about, they're a little bit younger kids too, so,
Yeah.
so that would be even a bigger issue, about them getting there with mom working and everything. But like I said, we've run into a lot of families that are like that, and they're taking multiple kids to different schools. They'll have a kid in high school, they'll have a kid in middle school, they'll have a kid in elementary school, and then trying to get all those kids to school along with working. I know that is another issue that comes up, and it's just trying to be creative and trying to see, do they have, other family members that can kind of help out with the situation, or is there any other resources that all of us can kind of think about? But yeah, I mean that's obviously a big issue with a lot of kids that we deal with.
Jack, yes. Before we forget this question, a couple things too, just on the process side, that you can be aware of, and feel free to reach out to my office, cases, but typically with middle schools and high schools, before we even get to this process, we have monthly SMART team meetings, what we call them, where I'm in the schools, and part of what we do is we will discuss some of these cases when they're in the collaborative plan process, or maybe they've had the collaborative plan, but they haven't hit 20 days. So first thing I would say is the collaborative plan, hopefully these issues are being brought up so the school can begin to work and develop a plan. That's the whole purpose of that, is to try and figure out what can be done. But then usually we're talking about cases at our SMART meetings, and if it's something where it's kind of just a transportation thing, and maybe it's more of a poverty issue than something bigger going on. Those are the cases I'm typically telling them we're going to hold off on filing. That's not really what we're meant for. And then also, if they do reach the point where we are getting referrals and they're going to diversion to be screened, we've had plenty of cases where the family has said, hey, transportation's been an issue, but it's better now, and so we'll go and get updated attendance, and yeah, it has improved. We're not going to file that. We're not going to do diversion. So there's hopefully the process is set up. There's multiple steps where hopefully we can catch those and intervene before it actually even gets to be a truancy court or diversion issue, but it's not a court system. So.
I like the idea of incentives for parents. What if we give movie cards to parents to get their kids to school on time? That's a great idea. If you're talking about process, what I think it works is when it gets to Shad's office, for them to process, okay, what could success look like? I think that works for us. I think they strategize before they get to the mediation center. I think having them meet with Shad's office to go over, this is a real thing, what do we need to do, so by the time they get to us, we kind of have a pretty good idea of what's going on. I think that's helping us to be successful. So now, I'm going to have Sheila and Terry talk about what happens when they get to the mediation center.
Yes, when we receive it, I have taken over all the scheduling, and I do a lot of the face-to-face too. But I have to thank the county that does the SRA. They write a wonderful, wonderful summary. We get the whole file we see the collaborative plans, we see everything. But that summary really gives me an in that when I first contact the parents with texts and with phone calls, I have particulars to tell them that we know their child a little bit. And then they seem to get real excited though that I'm not the school and I'm not the county. So this is a new person. And I will say, when I'm really fortunate and get a hold of them, and they have, within opening the file, which takes time to read and everything, and different things, I might have them scheduled in 2.5 or 3 hours for the 2 face-to-face meetings, and that is the best. I will tell you, I've spent up to 7 hours getting those developed, giving them an ear. I am amazed. I even have some of them calling me saying, oh, the principal has just now called me in for this. How do I react to that? And the mediation skills come in, well, what do you think you could do, and different things like that. So there is a lot of relationship building, even to get our 2 face-to-face meetings. The first face-to-face meeting that Terry will cover the most is called the individual private session, and that is the student, their parent, and anybody else they want to bring. That lets us know if this student has the capability and the mental health to be a strong voice in their truancy support circle, because we want the student to be a strong voice, because if they're agreeing and putting ideas out there, the chance of it being successful is much bigger. And so, and we try very hard. I want the IPS mediator, because that's only one mediator, if at all possible, to be in the truancy support circle. There'll be 2 mediators there. One we call the pacer, who introduces everybody and opens the meeting, and one who's the note taker and the reviewer and adds questions. At times that's impossible, but we try very hard, because that's part of the relationship building too. And at the IPS, Terry has done the most of them, because I think he's one of my strongest ones, and he has a form he goes through. I have discovered when I have other mediators doing it, we need the same information covered, but I've let them develop their own forms. And with that, I also, when I do one, give one of those forms to the student to take notes, so they sort of write their script. And they take that with them, so they can add to it. And it is amazing if that student brings it back to the truancy support circle, how much more confidence they have with that script that they've written. And this is how 2 mediators, and this is what we do at the support circles. I think there's a note sheet that I use at the IPS. It should come here. There it is. And that is how we get notes for ourselves. And if I can't have the same mediator at the circle, this has been very helpful if I have to have 2 mediators. And that is really important. Once we get to the circle, we go through these things. They share their strengths. They share their goals. Then they share the main reasons they miss schools. Then they share ideas they had to help them get to school. And then they have a stop. We call them the starts and stop. And number 4 here are the starts, besides what the county requires. Number 5 is the stop. We ask them to say one stop that they're in control of. And then I always send to the school, to the principal, the associate principal, the social worker, the counselor, and the psychologist, school psychologist. We ask them for anybody they're comfortable with. I've invited resource officers, I've invited individual teachers, a couple times I've invited paras, and one time there was a maintenance person I invited, and their therapists sometimes. And then I contact all the schools, those individuals, and have quite a few conversations with school personnel, and to help get ready. I've had conversations with therapists. If they can't be there, they get permission to share with me. This marvelous summary, when I first send to the school, I have to have permission to share that when they made it. And that is so helpful if the parent gives the permission. A few do not. So I try to not break any confidence, but to have an extra paragraph explaining what I have learned, possibly, that caused them to miss school. Once the circle's done, I take strong notes, or whoever the note taker, and that goes to our typist. And I will tell you, we just say we went through the strengths, we went through the goals. We don't state them for every student in the final plan. And then we state everything that is in the plan. The parent signs it, the student signed it at the same time Shad has his release signed, and it goes to Shad to start monitoring. Talk about relationship. I will tell you, we put in that they are to contact Shad from now on. But they have my number. I have talked at 10 at night to a crying parent. I have decided that the idea they have my number is an additional resource. I don't mind. I'm an old school counselor that was always available. I don't mind that at all, and I just tell them, remember to talk to your probation officer, but I don't tell them not to do that. Now, usually I can tell who's going to be successful, and as they get successful, I hear from them. I've had a few that weren't successful that call me in tears, and I just try to give them reinforcement that if it goes to court, they will have more supports to help them. So that's the process that comes from the 2 face-to-face meetings. Now, Terry's going to hit the IPS because it's so important to know if that student can be a voice or if it has to be adult-directed.
As you can tell, Sheila has a school background, and some of the great stuff that she does is she has them explore a trusted adult within the system that they want to be a part of the circle. And then they work to get that person there. We get experience in the office. I'll never forget, we had a coach show up, and the circle was starting, and here walked in the coach, and the look on that girl's face when she saw the coach was there was a big difference. And so they're hearing from those youth, who do they want in the room to support them to make this work well, and that's why I think our mediators are doing great at that. Terry?
Okay, I'm just going to briefly go through, break down the 2 IPS and the TSC that Sheila mentioned. And for the IPS, it's all in on preparing the youth for the bigger Truancy Circle meeting, building confidence, building trust, and we say to them over and over again, we don't want you to get to the TSC, the big meeting, and have surprises. We don't want you to be caught off guard by anything. So the IPS is really a dry run for what that bigger meeting is going to look like. And so we start off with some quick introductions and finding out exactly what they want to be, how they want to be referred to, because we're trying to get off on a good start. We don't want to be calling them something that they don't like or that they're uncomfortable with. And then we start to talk about interests a little bit and just ask them, what are some things that are interesting to you? And if they don't say anything, then we start running down the line. Sports, is it somebody at school? Is there a teacher you really like? Is there other activities you like? If we get to video games, that's always a hit. Then they perk up. If they haven't said anything, that gets them going a little bit. And then we talk to them about who's going to be at the meeting. And as Sheila said, 2 mediators, some individuals from school. All the teachers are invited, counselor and administration. And so the more people from school that are able to come, the better it is for the youth. And we talk about the length of the meeting. And then we talk about the agenda. And we'll go through that here in a little bit. But we also ask them to, or let them know that there's going to be a lot of questions. And we try to get them set up for understanding that we're not going to pitch it so much so that it's super easy for them. We're not going to ask them questions that are just yes, no. We want to ask them questions where they have to think a little bit and put some words together and put some sentences together. So we're asking them open-ended questions. And they really do well. If they're prepared for that, if we give them a time to analyze that and be thinking about it, they do well. And plus we do a lot of encouraging because as Shad mentioned earlier, they're being referred to the mediation center because the county sees them as a good candidate to get out of the legal system. And so we're letting them know the county's not filing at this point. So do a good job here, you can get yourself worked out of the legal system. So that they kind of buy into that. That's an important piece for them. And then, of course, we talked about the confidentiality issue. And we say to them, we're pulling for you. We're on your side. We want you to do well. We want you to shine and come out of this with a good, solid plan. So then at the IPS, the emphasis is on the youth's voice. We want them to get used to hearing themselves talk. We want them to get used to expressing their own ideas.
And we don't want them to think that all the adults in the room are gonna carry the meeting. It's their meeting, but all the adults are there to support them. And so we want to have them set up for that. We say to them, we don't want to ask a question and have you say, I don't know. Just know that when you get to the TSC, that's not an acceptable answer. No, I don't know, no blank stares. We want you to be prepared to be a leader in the meeting and have a response. And we'll also give them, and Sheila mentioned this, that we'll give them a worksheet to follow along with that's designed around the agenda. And so as we go through the agenda that they'll see for the Truancy Circle meeting, it'll be the same thing. And so as they go through that, and as they generate ideas, they're writing them down so that that can be referred to on the next, for the TLC meeting. Let's see. Okay, to close that IPS, there might be some instances where we will give them an assignment. I can think of one that a youth was saying, I go to bed at midnight and I get up at 6. It's working well for me. So I asked him, I said, check the experts, go online and see what you can find out for a 14-year-old, how much sleep you should have. And to his credit, he came back with an answer to that at the TSC. Then before they go out the door, we review the date and time of the TSC so that we don't have any mess ups on that. And then we're ready to go for the TSC. So when we start the TSC, we do introductions again, make sure they're briefed and know who's all at the meeting and who's there that's going to be involved. And Sheila and I make a point of saying out loud again, the most important voice here is you. The people who are at the meeting are in a supportive role. We want them to be the ones that generate ideas. For adults, it's hard for us because sometimes the answers, the solutions, are so crystal clear. We just want to tell them. But if we do that, you've all seen this. You work with youth all the time. When you begin telling, they glaze over and the listening stops. And so if we can get the ideas to come from them, it's a little bit harder, it takes more work, it takes some patience, but we need to be in the questioning mode. We need to be asking questions and get whole answers out of them. So a good reminder of that before we start each meeting is good. And sometimes that's helpful for parents to hear that too. Some of you here might watch Kansas City Royals games. And the guy on their HUD, he often, when the Royals do something well, he'll say, it's a beautiful thing. Well, when we get to the TSC and the youth comes in, sits down, sits up straight, has his worksheet in front of him, that's a beautiful thing. It's a good start to the meeting. And what we do also is, before we really get into the heart of that meeting, we'll review how things went with the IPS. And that's another piece of encouragement for the youth, because many times he's done really well, she's done really well. We want everybody at that meeting to know they put some effort and time into their plan, their things that they're getting ready to plan. So let me quickly go through, I think we have an agenda slide somewhere. There might be another one. Okay, good, yeah, right there. And so we follow that agenda just like we talked about with the youth at the IPS, so that there's, again, no surprises. And that all of those early pieces, the strengths are kind of like the interests at the IPS. It's a chance to build trust, give them a chance to talk about something that they're familiar with and comfortable with themselves. And so that's a good start. And then we've talked the long-term goals. That's just simply helping that youth think more than just hour to hour, day to day, get them thinking big long-term. Then the root cause issues, try to help them be as specific as possible. What is it that's causing all these absences? What is it that's causing the truancy? We're always impressed with how the answers they come up with. It could be as simple as, I play video games most of the night. Or it can be more complex, like, I just don't want to be there. So we try to get the easy ones first. And I'd say that first one we can come up with a solution with a lot easier than that second one. And so we want them to break it down and give us as much detail as possible, so we got something to work with when we get to the next step, which is the something new part. And we take each one of the root cause issues and ask them to just mentally put a line through that root cause problem and just say, we're gonna start off with something new. And if we're gonna do that, we have to eliminate the old problem, and we have to replace that with something that's gonna work better. So that's why we emphasize the something new in the New Start plan. Even going as detailed as I will begin to, so that it gets real concrete in their head about the change that has to occur. And the ideas that the youth come up with, we refer to them as priority plans, because that's something that they've really done. They've come up with it, it's their idea, it's their thought. That's going to be, in the whole set of plans, that's going to be the priority plan, because the county has requirements. They really don't have a lot of say in that. And the school many times are requirements that they might not have a lot of voice in. Sometimes they do, but this one of these priority plans, the ones that they come up with to change the root cause issues, those are priority plans, those are things that they are directly in charge of. Okay, and then the stop plan, and Sheila talked about that. We just asked him, what's the biggest thing here that could sabotage this whole plan you've been creating? And then for them, they've been thinking about this since the IPS, they can just come right out and say, I need to stop, and then name it. We think that's a good way to flush it out and get that most important thing out of there, and they're conscious of it. And then at the end of the meeting, the recorder mediator reads it all back to the students and the adults. Everybody in the room can hear that new plan restated. Everybody's crystal clear on it. And then we asked each adult in the meeting we announced this at the start of the meeting, that we asked them to think about the performance of the youth and the things they've said. What's one thing that you can really identify as a real strength that they showed in that meeting, and give an affirmation? So we go around the room and everybody gives an affirmation. The recorder writes that down, and they get that as a document to take with them when they leave the meeting. Then we have the signing of forms, and Truancy Circle meeting closes.
Questions?
Just some statistics. So far, we've worked on 146 of these in the past couple of years, male, female a little more than male, are the ones we've worked on. The grades we've worked on, 6th at 32, 7th at 60, and 8th at 54. And this is the number of referrals we've received in the past few years, and that 146. That's how it's gone. And most of the time, when people come, they're able to successfully complete our process. So most of the time we get rid of them, but Sheila does an incredible job of texting, calling, doing everything we can to get in contact to get them in there. That, as you know, with Truancy, that's one of the biggest issues that we have, is to get them there. Usually when they get there, most of the time we can get them to come up with an agreement. There are times, and as you know, with mental health issues, that we do an assessment after Shad does, and we just like, we just can't get them to interact, so that happens as well. But we have a variety of times that we get to meet with families, and there are times that we have mental health issues. The way the youth responds is all different. And so we may have particular youth, if we can get them to respond in a certain way, might be very different from other youth. Yes?
How are you able to provide services for families that are Spanish speaking, or have the transportation concerns to get to these meetings? How do you work with the families regarding those situations?
I get an interpreter. It's been marked, I make sure I get an interpreter for both the IPS and for the Truancy Support Circle. I have a few times gone and got people. I have written notes to, we for the IPS will schedule into the evening to meet with them so they do not have to miss work. We will also, but the Truancy Support Circle, when we want to have educators, I don't want one of those to start later than 4. And with more students, I have got permission for students to be dismissed at 2:30 to do at 3 o'clock, so we could do at 4, so we could have two meetings in a day for those support circles. But I write so that they can have paid time off. I've written to employers, and the parents really like that. The 2 cases that are still open, they came in at the end of the year. We will get their IPS in anytime we can. We will not schedule their truancy circle till after August 1st, because even educators, even if they're not quite on contract, are willing to start to think of the new year and we can get some. But I won't try to do a truancy circle before August 1st for things.
Another question, yes.
And how many days absent do they get referred to you? I know the school sends out like at 5, 10, 15, 20, but when do you start working with them as far as the circle goes and the,
Yeah, so typically 20 is what we have to have, like bare minimum to file. Honestly though, most of the cases that we're seeing, when we hold a collaborative plan, we have to wait till day 10. By the time that gets scheduled, or if they've missed some, the difficulties with that, they could be at 20 when we hold a collaborative plan. The statute says we have to wait a reasonable period of time. Our office has determined 30 days, a month, a calendar month is a reasonable period of time. Our judges seem to be okay with that. So really a lot of the cases that we're getting, by the time they actually hit my office, we're probably at 30 days, maybe even 40, sometimes 50. All just kind of depends when that collaborative plan can happen, or if we've documented that first, or we've tried it. I would say it's pretty rare that we're getting cases that are just at 20 or 21 days, realistically, even though we could.
could you, like with the mediation, when they're at 10 days, to do like an early intervention for this, so they don't get to 20 and 30 and 40 and 50?
That is a great question. Something that I've been thinking about, trying to figure out how we can do that within the framework of the statute. I think it's probably more realistic with middle schoolers who are not actually filing in court. But yeah, there is definitely a need to get going sooner. You know, because some of these cases, I mean, by the time we actually get approved for diversion, you know, they might be a full semester in the school year, and really miss a lot of opportunities for education.
No cost to the families to participate in the diversion program?
No, we'll find it through the county.
A couple questions. Were you hold the meetings, the first question, something the school or helper, and then if a youth from 6 to 8:30 has a law violation, are they eligible for the truancy?
Eligible for truancy with the law violation?
Probably not, only because if they're at a law violation point, the interventions that youth life that they probably need are going to be a lot more intensive than what we can offer through diversion. We do though have youth that are both on diversion for law violation and truancy. We'll do that, but if they're already in the court system.
This started right out of COVID. Our intent was to have them in the schools. What we learned as having them at a neutral site might be a good idea, just to get everybody a little more relaxed. And a lot of our school people are over Zoom.
And once we receive them, my goal is to have both those face-to-face meetings within 2 weeks. Sometimes that's really hard because the parent has to get permission to miss work for the second meeting and things like that. But my goal is 2 to 3 weeks, and we hit that on probably half of the cases easily.
These fall under, like, I know our mediation center has OJJEP grants.
Yes.
So that's kind of
Yes,
some of the
that's where
funding.
some of that can get started.
Yeah, can I have the mic?
Yes.
Hello, my name is Riley Decora. I'm a 14-year truancy officer. Is there anybody here 14 years? Anybody doing truancy for 14 years?
20.
20, okay, great.
I've
And,
been
and,
through it myself.
in the 14 years, I had one parent say thank you to me. And they said I couldn't have did it without you. But I just wanted to say thank you to each and every one of you. Because what you do isn't easy. And I used to say, Ready to Core would come to your house and knock. You'd open your door,
hey, glad to see you. When I come knock now, they lock the door, pull the shades, and don't answer the door. And that's okay, that's okay. Because this thing that we're having issues with, I said, I don't got a kid problem, I got a parenting problem. And so I want to know from the county attorney how stringent you get with the parents, because contributing to delinquency of the minor carries some jail time, carries some fines, might even get DHS involved. And I don't know how many of those things you have, but hopefully we can get that. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, you want to serve all?
I'll take a stab at that. When I first started in the office 10, 11 years ago, we did see more where we'd actually file it's class 3 misdemeanor for not getting your kids to school. I think what we found is our county court judges that see that don't do anything with it. Very minimal fines. It's not, you know, okay, I pay $25 and I move on. So we've really gone away from that. We will do educational neglect filings. You know, 6th graders are probably on kind of the cusp of, is it really more of a parent issue? So we'll look at the collaborative plan. I'll be talking with the school to see if this is really more of a parent issue, there's a bigger issue going on here, let's get HHS involved. If we have 7th and 8th graders, it becomes a little bit more tricky to figure out if it's a kid issue or a parent issue. So then we might pull attendance for if they have younger kids. And we see that, okay, every single kid has attendance issue, there's something bigger going on here. We'll look at HHS involvement and educational neglect filing. So I try and keep an open line with that and really try and dissect if, you know, if it's something where parents trying and maybe they need parenting skills, but they're motivated, or is it something where there's a bigger issue at home that we need to address with HHS.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
When you have situations like, you know, parents having to go to work early in the morning, you have high school that stay at home, what kind of support have you used?
Well, and like I said, we could put in like services like on the PMT to kind of work with the family, like on the issues. Obviously, it's up to the parent though to make sure that they're getting the kid to school, and if it is more than one kid that we're dealing with, younger ones, siblings, then they can also work with the family on a plan around that and try to pull in maybe family members or neighbors. You know, I know the schools also, some of the schools have worked with families on carpooling, like all the kids get to the school through this carpool, and so I mean just trying to do creative things like that.
I'm not gonna let you talk. Our time is up. I appreciate your interest in this topic, and thanks for being here.